From Tennessee.
Mr. President, I ask consent that the quorum call be vitiated.
Without objection.
Mr. President, I ask consent to speak as if in morning business for 20 minutes.
Without objection.
And would the chair please let me know when 5 minutes remains?
Certainly. The senator will be so notified.
I thank the chair. Mr. President, I want to speak this afternoon about the United States Senate as an institution, about its majority leader, Senator Reid, who is my friend, about various conversations we've been having in the Senate and discussions that the majority leader has said about how the Senate should operate. I know that the majority leader cares about this institution. I believe it. He said it. He shows it. He has one of the most difficult jobs that anybody could possibly have. One time he told me, my job is to make everybody mad. And in many ways it is when you have a body of 100 that operates by unanimous consent. Every one of us is equals. It's a very difficult job to be the minority leader, which the Republican leader is today. It's a more difficult job to be the majority leader. I emphasize this because I know that Senator Reid cares about this institution. And I know that Senator Reid does not want to go down in history as the man who ended the United States Senate. But if he persists in doing what he says he will do, which is to break the rules of the Senate, to change the filibuster rules, that will be his legacy. He will go down in history as the senator who ended the United States Senate. Now you might say, well, Senator Alexander, that's a very serious charge to make about a majority leader whom you know and respect and who you just said cares about this institution. It is a serious charge to make, but Mr. President, the only reason I would say it is because Senator Reid said it himself. Shortly after I came to the Senate, 3 years afterwards, in 2005, we Republicans, including this senator, were very upset about what we felt was unfair efforts by Democrats to keep President Bush from securing an up and down vote on his judicial nominees. We were in the majority, we Republicans. We had a Republican president of the United States. We felt that the attacks on the president's nominees were extraordinarily unfair. And the other side was using the rules of the Senate to prevent an up or down vote. They were filibustering President Bush's nominees. We couldn't change their minds. So a number of senators persuaded Senator Frist, my colleague from Tennessee, who was then the majority leader, that we should then change the filibuster rules in order to get an up or down vote on the judges. We knew our goal was right. And so we were going to, if we had to, break the rules to change the rules. Well, as you might guess, the minority, the Democrats at the time, erupted in indignation. They said this hadn't been done in the 240 or 50 years of the United States Senate. They pointed out the differences between the Senate and the House of Representatives. Almost every distinguished member of the Democratic side of the Senate, the majority leader, Senator Biden, now the Vice President of the United States, Senator Obama, now the President of the United States, Senator Clinton, now the Secretary of State of the United States, they denounced this evil Republican plan to change the rules of the Senate, in effect, break the rules of the Senate, because the rule says you can only change the rules with 67 votes in order to change the filibuster rule. Here's what the majority leader said in his book, The Good Fight. Quote, "The storm had been gathering all year, and word from conservative columnists and in conservative circles was that Senator Frist of Tennessee, who was the majority leader, had decided to pursue a rules change that would kill the filibuster for judicial nominations. And," continues Senator Reid, "once you opened that Pandora's box, it was just a matter of time before a Senate leader who couldn't get his way on something moved to eliminate the filibuster for regular business as well, and that simply put would be the end of the United States Senate." That's Senator Reid when he was the minority leader or the minority whip of the United States Senate. I guess he was the minority leader at that time. Well, today another storm is gathering and the shoes are reversed. You know, the majority leader is the one who wants to invoke what he then called the nuclear option. That was the Democrats' name for what the Republicans were trying to do, and we're the ones who are saying, please don't do that. Stop and think about this. This is not what you want to do to the United States Senate. Now, Mr. President, people who are listening might say, well, wait a minute. This filibuster business has gotten out of hand. And what's wrong with having a majority vote in the United States Senate? Don't we learn in the first grade? At least we did in Maryville, Tennessee. You know, we have an election for the class president. Everybody raises their hands, and whoever gets the majority wins. That's the American way. That is the American way, except it's not the way in the United States Senate from the beginning of our country. We had a Frenchman who wandered through this country in the 1830s, a young man named de Tocqueville. He wrote a book called Democracy in America, which is still the finest exposition of our democracy, understanding of our democracy that we have, because it was an outsider looking at us. De Tocqueville saw two great dangers to the United States at that time. One was Russia. He was prescient about that. But the second was what he called the tyranny of the majority. The tyranny of the majority, that in a great big complicated country like this, that somehow the majority and its passions and its suddenness and its enthusiasm would run over the minorities. And somehow he must have known that we'd be a nation filled with minorities. We'd be almost a minority nation. And that somehow those minorities needed protection. And what has happened over all those years is that the Senate has stood, as Senator Byrd used to say, the necessary fence that protected minorities in America from the tyranny of the majority. That's why we have a United States Senate. So if a freight train runs through the House, it can't run through here. It has to slow down and stop, and we have to think about it. And that's why we have a tradition in the United States Senate of unlimited amendment, unlimited debate on any subject, until 60 of us decide that's enough, which is what we're about to do with the Defense Authorization Bill. We've had, under the leadership of Senator McCain and Senator Levin the chairman, and I give Senator Reid great credit for this as well. I think it's 90 amendments have been dealt with. We'll have a cloture vote tomorrow. It'll probably pass. I'll vote for it. That means it's time to end the debate, time to limit the discussion and come to a conclusion. That's the way the Senate is supposed to work. Here's an image of the difference between the House and the Senate. Most of us know of the work of Robert Caro, who's written the books on Lyndon Johnson. And when I first came to the Senate 10 years ago, I read that first chapter in Caro's book called The Deaths of the Senate. I imagine the presiding officers had a chance to read that as well. I still say to new senators or anybody else interested in this body, if you really want to understand the United States Senate, read Robert Caro's chapter, The Deaths of the Senate. He talks about how you look at all these deaths, and after an election, just as they will this time, they'll come in and they'll move two from over here to over there because Democrats won a couple of seats, and that's the way this works. So this is the image of the Senate where everybody is equal, and it takes 60 to get a result, and the idea is unlimited debate and consideration to protect the rights of the minority. That means the people who are out right now, who may not be out tomorrow. Now, what's the image of the House? The image of the House goes to the House Rules Committee. I've been there. David Dreyer took me there. He is chairman of the House Rules Committee. It's an ornate office. Every piece of legislation in the House has to go through the Rules Committee. Republicans have a narrow majority in the House of Representatives, but guess what the composition of the Rules Committee is? 8 Republicans, 4 Democrats. What if the Democrats gained a 1-vote majority in the House? 8 Democrats, 4 Republicans. And what would happen is any piece of legislation the majority want to pass would run through the House like a freight train. That's not what the United States Senate is about. That's why Senator Dodd, in his farewell address, said to those in the Senate who've never been in the minority, please be careful before you change these filibuster rules. Mr. President, we have 30 members of the United States Senate who've never been in the minority. They've not had a chance to experience what some of us have had a chance to experience. Now, I haven't been in the Senate all that long by Senate standards. I've been here 10 years. But I've watched the Senate, Mr. President, for a long time. I first came here in 1967 as a legislative aide to Howard Baker. Everett Dirksen was the Republican leader. Mike Mansfield was the Democratic leader. The Senate has never worked perfectly. Every majority leader, every minority leader would tell you that. In the 60s, it was Senator Williams from Delaware who would object and slow things down. In the 70s, it was Senator Allen from Alabama. He would tie the Senate up in complete knots. Just one senator, because of the individual rights senator have. In the 80s, it was Senator Metzenbaum from Ohio. He held my own nomination up to be U.S. Education Secretary for 3 or 4 months. There was nothing I could do about it. I, of course, thought that was very unfair, but it was part of this process whereby a senator can slow things down. Now, how do leaders respond to that? Well, in 2005, I was as angry as anyone about the Bush judges who weren't getting an up or down vote, but I didn't think that it was right to break the rules, to change the rules of the United States Senate. I didn't want to turn the Senate into the House of Representatives. So I made 2 speeches on the floor, Mr. President, and suggested what became, in effect, the Gang of 14. I didn't participate in the gang because my colleague, Senator Frist, was the Republican leader, and out of respect to him, I didn't want to undermine him. But Senator Pryor and Senator others, Senator McCain on this side, 14 senators got together and said, we can't let this happen. And they met and they worked and they agreed they wouldn't change the rules, and they wouldn't filibuster. And so so when that happened, that meant that there couldn't be a change of the rules by the Republicans and there couldn't be a filibuster by the Democrats if these 14 senators agreed with one another, and they created a compromise solution which has us where we are today. Now, other ways that leaders have responded. During the Panama Canal debates in 1978 and 9, I believe, Senator Byrd and Senator Baker, and I have it somewhere here, were the leaders. I think Senator Byrd was the majority leader. And the opponents of the Panama Canal, and this was a time, the Panama Canal was very unpopular with a lot of people. And so, according to Senator Byrd, quote, opponents centered their efforts on winning approval of killer amendments. Now, we won't know what those are. I believe one of the main reasons the majority leader doesn't like bills to come to the floor is because he thinks some of the amendments offered by the minority are going to be unpleasant for for Democrats or even Republicans to vote for. Well, my feeling about that is if you don't want to, why would you join the Grand Ole Opry if you don't want to sing? I mean, we come here to debate, amend, and to vote. And here's what Senator Reid said. Senator Byrd said, opponents centered their efforts on winning approval of killer amendments. I, Senator Byrd said, made it clear that only the leadership amendments and certain clarifying reservations and understandings would be acceptable. Opponents attempted to circumvent this strategy by offering amendments that were phrased in such a way that senators would find them difficult to turn down. At first glance, many of these amendments seemed innocuous and pro-American. Had they succeeded, however, they would have effectively killed the treaty. This is Senator Byrd. In all, 145 amendments, 26 reservations, 18 understandings, 3 declarations, a total of 192 changes were proposed. 88 of these were voted on. In the final analysis, says Senator Byrd, nothing passed that was not acceptable to the joint leadership. In other words, the joint leadership set up there, they let everybody vote, they let them ventilate, they let them have their say, they let them do their job, and then they defeated them. They either tabled their amendment or they beat it. That's what they were able to do. That's very different than the way we're operating today, and that's the way I would respectfully suggest we should operate. In the 1980s, and I mentioned it was never perfect, But during the Byrd-Baker area, basically, the leaders would put a bill on the floor, and if, as the one we're currently considering, the defense authorization bill had the support of the chairman and the ranking minority member, they then, in the 1980s, would simply open the bill for amendments. And they might get 300. Then they'd ask unanimous consent to close off amendments. And of course, they'd get it because if anybody objected, they'd just say, well, throw your amendment in there. And then they'd start voting. The senator has 5 minutes. Thank you, Mr. President. Then they'd start voting. And as an example of the Panama Canal debate issued, they'd table a lot. They'd vote a lot. They would stay up on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday nights, and Thursday nights, and pretty soon senators would be thinking about seeing their grandchildren or going home, or maybe their amendment wasn't so important, and the bill would either be passed or defeated. But everybody went home thinking, I've had a chance to be a United States senator. I may be in the minority, I may be in the majority, but I've given voice to the feelings of the people of my state, which was what I was elected to do. So is the filibuster rule the problem? No, the filibuster rule is not the problem. The problem is if I come down to the floor with an amendment, the majority leader uses a procedural motion to cut me off, and I don't get to vote on it. I don't get to talk about it. I don't get to vote on it. Now, to his great credit, he's not doing that with the defense authorization bill. He didn't do that with the postal reform bill. There have been a number of other bills this year that proved that the Senate could work. There was even an amendment by the senator from Kentucky that members of both sides didn't want to vote on. This was cutting off aid to 3 Middle Eastern states. The administration didn't want to vote, but finally we voted, and what happened? We had a huge, great debate. Many senators spoke their feelings. In the end, there were 87 to 10. The amendment failed, and it didn't do any damage to anybody. In fact, it made the Senate look like more of what it should be. So, Mr. President, the filibuster is and has been democracy's greatest show, the right to talk your head off. And we need to get back to the situation where we have committee bills like the defense authorization bill. We bring them to the floor. They are put on the floor. The majority leader asks for amendments. Let us all put our amendments in and let us start voting. Let us start voting. Let's get back to the time where the majority leader and the minority leader or the committee chairman and the ranking member have a product they're invested in and they work together to keep it intact. And if they do that, they usually defeat Republican amendments or Democratic amendments, or occasionally an amendment will come along that has so much support that it seems like an improvement of the bill and it's adopted. So my purpose today is not to make a hard job harder. I said at the beginning, the majority leader's got the toughest job in town and maybe one of the toughest in the country. My hope would be that maybe if he has a few minutes tonight, he'd go back home and reread his own book, which he published, and remember that he and I agreed at that time that that would be a bad result. And remember the words that he said in 2005 about the value of the filibuster, the value of having a body that protected minority rights, and how damaging it would be to make the Senate like the House. And I would hope that the majority leader and the Republican leader could quietly meet, talk this through. We spent a lot of time on this 2 years ago. Senator Schumer and I did, many of us did, took 6 months, thought we had an agreement, somehow it broke down. But there's no reason it should break down. We can operate the Senate under the rules we have. We can get bills through committee, we can get them to the floor, we can let anybody have an amendment, and then we can talk it and vote it and pass it or defeat it. That's what we should be doing. So I know the majority leader cares about this institution. I know he cares about it deeply. He spent his life here, devoted to it. I know he is responding to a variety of suggestions from members of his caucus about what's best to do. But I think it's the responsibility of the leaders of both sides and people who've seen this body for a while to remind everyone, particularly those who've never been in the minority, that this is a body to protect the minority. And any of us can be in the minority sometime. Any of us can be in the minority. And I know that he does not want to destroy the the United States Senate. But in his words, if we break the rules to change the rules, those weren't his words. His words were that if we change the filibuster rules, that it would be the end of the United States Senate. I don't want that to happen. I don't want that to be the majority leader's legacy. I don't believe he wants it to be. And I, as one senator, am willing to encourage the Republican leader and the majority leader to work together, solve this problem, and let's get our attention focused back on the big problem facing our country, which is how do we get a budget agreement that gets our economy moving again. Mr. President, I'd like to ask consent to put in the record a few articles, including a chapter from the Majority Leader's book, an article from The Hill by Martin Peony, who used to work here, who makes the points I've been making, an article by Richard Ehrenberg, who was on Senate and House staffs for 30, 40 years. You find that people who've worked in the Senate and leave it, whether they're Republicans or Democrats, seem to have the same view. I'd like to put Senator Byrd's statement, his last appearance before the Senate Rules Committee. I was there before he died, where he urged us not to break down this fence. Excerpts from Senator Dodd's farewell address. I'd like to ask consent for all those to follow my speech.
Without objection.
Thank you, Mr. President. I yield the floor.